All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Simply Finance with Shane White. I am pumped today to have Ellis Fried on the podcast, the founder of Simple. And Ellis, I hope I pronounced that correctly, first of all. But
You did.
secondly, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Shane. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you taking the time to come on. Do you mind giving everyone a little intro to yourself and then obviously the brand?
Yeah. So I started the company Simple a couple of years ago out of my apartment at the University of Michigan. Basically, Simple is a clean label functional foods company. We take effective doses and blends of functional ingredients like adaptogens and nootropics and infuse them into delicious low sugar products you can take on the go. So our first product line is actually rebranding, relaunching, but launching with a functional 100-calorie bar line. And our first four SKUs will be energy, focus, calm, and immunity. We're actually gearing up to launch this summer.
Exciting.
Yeah.
So, let's maybe back up. What was the driver for a rebrand? And the reason I want to start with that is I personally, and we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, going through my time at RX, obviously like their pivotal moment was a rebrand. So I always think it's really interesting for people to understand like what goes through the mind of the person in charge of why you would rebrand a brand.
Yeah, so we launched actually just about 6 months before the pandemic hit. So we launched with a line of functional bites. So it's essentially four small bites into each resealable grab and go pouch. And personally, I did hundreds of demos myself, talked to thousands of consumers, retailers, distributors, figuring out what was working, what wasn't working. And actually, this product line was going to be our second product line after our bites line. And from a lot of those conversations, we kept getting like two main things from retailers and two main things from consumers. On the retail side, it was, okay, where does this product go in the store? It was a grab and go item. I know you know RX bar, you know the bar aisle very well. So it was a single serve product. So we were supposed to be in the bar aisle, but it was in a resealable pouch.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it didn't quite fit in the bar aisle. So a lot of confusion with merchandiser and buyers at the retail level. And at the consumer level, our really primary focus is delivering these functional ingredients in a convenient and delicious way. And so by doing that, we want to create the least friction possible in delivering these ingredients. And so our old product had about 2.5 times the amount of sugar and calories as our current one. And for our core target consumers, of especially millennial female consumers, the sugar and calories is always a big one that we kept getting. And so it was an opportunity for us to also sort of take a step back on the product, but also take a step back on the brand. I built the brand very piecemeal, as sort of learned as I went. And over the course of a year of launching and being in market, you learn a lot of things that you would have done differently if you would have known it. And so at the time that we're launching a new product line, it made the most sense to also take a step back from the brand level and think about our messaging and positioning and core value props a lot more and deeper than we did in our first sort of software launch.
Got it. Totally makes sense. And so, was that a huge decision? And would love, people obviously on here we talk a lot about going 0 to 1. So you actually had gone basically to 1
Yeah.
with a product. What was it like to do you remember, I guess, maybe the conversation you had with family, friends, coworkers, whoever it may have been, where you kind of made that decision to like, hey, we got to redo this? Because I think for a lot of people, that's kind of like a pivotal moment where some people might have just folded up and been like, this isn't going to work and we're done.
We were almost
Or
there.
yeah. Or,
Yeah.
driving ahead and trying something that maybe wouldn't have worked long term. So I'd love to know how you kind of thought through that.
Yeah, so I do credit a lot of it to COVID. So as I mentioned, we launched about 6 months before COVID happened, and we were growing fast. We were going 200-300 stores in our first couple months. We got into Equinox, their hotels, Urban Outfitters, Bloomingdale's, Erewhon, XL Spots. We had a lot of real good accounts that basically 80% of them closed overnight, and so it
Right.
got to a point we didn't have the proper runway to really build our ecom platform, and a lot of our retail was shut down for a long period of time. And so it, with all of that, came to a point where we actually ended up merging with another company.
Oh,
So there
okay.
was another company, yeah. So it was actually these mini bars infused with CBD, and so they were supposed to get to market literally March of 2020. They had real good investors and backers behind them, people that I've known for the past couple of years, and we met, sort of came together and decided that their product format and our sort of functional angle was a perfect match. So by merging the two companies, we actually merged with his product line, our ingredient focus, and now sort of continuing on as Simple as a surviving company, but ended up bringing the founder of that into our company as well.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was definitely a decision that involved all of our investors, all of our advisors over the course of like 6 months deciding if we were going to go full on into this. Ended up working out for the better.
What was that process like? I mean, that talk about like the craziness of COVID. I don't
Yeah.
think, to be honest, I've heard a lot of stories about food brand mergers during this whole thing. If anything, that's nothing. I have not heard any of those happening, to be honest.
Yeah. So I think COVID presents a lot of unique opportunities for people. It was definitely something that we probably wouldn't have entertained prior to COVID. But COVID definitely hurt our business quite a bit. And so kind of to your point, like we had our ups and downs during the especially last summer 2020. And the actually investors of this other company that we merged with, I knew them pretty well, and we always sort of wanted to do something together, and it sort of spun into this over the course of about 6 months of conversations, both again with our investors, their stakeholders, and whatnot. And the bottom line was they had a great team. We had really myself was running the team, great brand and product, and sort of longer term vision, especially with the CBD. Their entire business was centered around CBD. There was a
Oh,
lot of regulatory issues with retail at the time, a lot of regulatory issues with online at the time also, and sort of not a lot of clarity around that. And our broader sort of functional landscape, I think was a more appealing value proposition, and one that we could build a long lasting brand around, and a lot more white space, I think, in this category also.
yeah. And it's interesting because the space that you're going to play in, I think there's, yeah, to your point, there's a huge runway for it. I've heard of like inklings of brands thinking about getting into it, but honestly, you're the first brand that I feel like has a real like brand design and focus solely around it. Would you mind giving everyone just kind of, would love to know where it came from? Like where did you think that like bites or bars needed to have or there, I guess where there was a white space for a brand to have, boosted components to it?
Yeah. So I was super into functional ingredients over the past like half dozen years. I was never really into the emergencies or sort of the quicker fix type products or caffeine or 5 hour energy shots or anything like that. So I was always
Sure.
into more of like a plant-based sort of healthier lifestyle. And so I would sort of discover these powders and started taking superfood and adaptogen type powders every day, and it really worked. And so wanting to find a way to get those benefits on the go. And for me, I also ate an energy or a snack bar every single day. And so looking at the landscape, powders and supplements is pretty crowded, even over the past couple of years, even more so now. Beverages has become increasingly crowded in the functional space. And in the bar space, there really wasn't anything that delivered on clean label, real doses of functional ingredients. So not just sprinkling some ingredients here and there, like
Right.
real doses of these ingredients that also tasted really good. And the bar category, obviously $20 billion category. I eat one every day. Apparently, a lot of people do if given RX's success and whatnot. And so the category could use a product like this that was delivering real dose of functional ingredients, 100% plant based, no gluten, low sugar, low calorie. That could satisfy both a quick everyday snack and your daily dose of functional ingredients.
Love it. And then how did you kind of narrow in? I feel like there's a lot of functional ingredients. How did you narrow in basically on like four really important ones?
So it wasn't as much so on the ingredients for me as more so as the benefits. So looking at unique use occasions on from morning to night, energy. Obviously, looking at the energy category, and we weren't even really looking at bar specific, but energy category in general, huge category. Immunity, everything going on, not just with COVID, but getting sick in general. The rise of probiotics, vitamin C, and that whole category has exploded. And there's really nothing in the bar category that satisfies that. Calm, you see the rise in like CBD and ashwagandha and all these different ingredients that lead to greater calm. And the last one being focus. Obviously, productivity is that sort of fourth one that everyone's looking to biohack or nail down their and improve their own productivities. So it's really more of the benefit outcomes, and then sort of backing into the ingredients that can satisfy those outcomes. And if we're looking at from morning to night, we try to create each product to have a specific time of day and use occasion to create the least amount of confusion for the customer as possible.
Got it. Okay. Love it. And then like it seems like obviously you guys have a very clean label. Would you mind giving everyone just kind of a background into like how do you even like start? Like obviously on here we talk a lot about going 0 to 1.
Yeah.
You guys have a lot of what I would think have to become expensive products to go into this finished product. How has that process been? Just trying to, acquire the best ingredients that like check all these boxes that you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, so backtrack even a couple of years. This was a product that I started out of my own kitchen with very no food scientists, no chefs, trying to make something happen. I had no personal chef background, and so it was about 300 or 400 different recipes I cook up in a blender in my own apartment. So there was a good amount of trial and error, both in sourcing the ingredients and actually making the product. Fast forward to our current product, we have an expert food scientist team, expert. Chef team that's creating these products in tandem with myself instead of just myself
Okay.
making
Yeah.
these together. And they also help us a lot with procurement. And so, looking at this functional ingredient landscape, there's a lot of red flags, both in terms of potency and effectiveness, and also sort of regulation, whether it's online or in big box stores like Whole Foods and Fresh Market. So, not every ingredient that you see in supplement form is allowed in ready to eat food. CBD, obviously, like one of the best examples that we actually strip from our products specifically because of that. But it goes deeper even into nootropics. There's a lot of regulation issues around things like Bacopa or lion's mane and stuff that you might see fairly often in powder form, but not as widely accepted in food. So all of our ingredients are GRAS certified, which is generally regarded as safe, and that's by the FDA. So that we basically had to go through our list of targeted ingredients and then narrow it down based on what both large retailers would accept and also the FDA would recognize. And then there's the co-packer. So the co-packer also doesn't want to be responsible for ingredients that aren't GRAS or that aren't certified by the FDA as safe. So then that's that third level of, okay, now we've narrowed down the ingredients that are acceptable. And now we have to figure out how to make these taste good. I don't know if you've tried these sort of powders yourself, but most of them taste like crap.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
being
I
able
say most
to
functional powders that I've tried do
now,
not taste good. You're kind of
now
chugging them down or you're mixing them in with fruit or something, right?
Yeah, so that was another big hurdle that we worked on for several months, making these taste good and also being super clean label, plant-based, gluten-free, all that type of stuff. So over the course of about 6 months, and we actually just finished our final recipes a couple weeks ago, and I guess biased, but they taste amazing. So I'm excited for people to try them soon.
Yeah, well, congrats, man. That's exciting. It's exciting to like have
Thank you.
that breakthrough, right? I mean, that had to have been a lot of iterations, a lot of different
Yeah,
testing and
because
learning.
and you get a lot of you get a lot of samples and iterations that taste like crap. And you're like, all right, there's no way this is we can get this amount of these ingredients to taste good in this little 100-calorie bar. So to get the final product done and scaled up was relieving.
Yeah, no, I bet. I bet. What was like, you had a crazy year, especially going through COVID and going through a merger. Was there any like major takeaways that or a hurdle, I guess, either one, that you could the audience could take away from this episode of just a lesson learned if you think back to your year in COVID on what ended up working in your favor that was a really big challenge.
Yeah, so I would say something that didn't work in our favor that we're pivoting now and putting a lot of emphasis on is the direct to consumer channel and owning your customers. We saw very clearly when 80% of our retailers closed, we didn't own those customers and that was shut off. If we had built our own online customer base and had loyal followers on our own website that we invested that time and money into, we would have been able to keep those customers throughout COVID. And even if stores closed, we would be able to sort of rely on that channel. And so as we go into this rebrand and relaunch, we're focused about 90% of our sales efforts onto our direct-to-consumer online subscription model website. And so
Smart,
we
man.
are still launching with a couple hundred of our retailers that we had prior, but really narrowing in on our direct consumer customers, building that retention, building up sort of that repeat purchase, and that also influenced our product decision. this product, especially 100-calorie functional bar, if you have, let's say, our energy product, for example, has about as much caffeine as an espresso shot from green tea and ginseng in each product. It's a product that you can eat every single day on subscription that can really succeed in the direct to consumer channel. Whereas our other product, maybe 250 calories, 14, 15 grams of sugar, it was a bit harder product to eat every single day. And so when we're thinking about direct to consumer doesn't work for everybody. It doesn't work for every product, especially. And so when we're thinking about our channel strategy, think about a product that can also work on that channel. So I think owning your customer as long as and as much as possible, especially early on, was our biggest takeaway.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. I've talked about it on here a few times that COVID opened the door for like two situations. One, people who like were ready to go and either were already on it or were working to have a better e-commerce, ecosystem.
Yeah,
It was a huge explosion in Q2 and Q3 of last year. And then there were brands where like if you didn't have some of that figured out yet, or maybe it wasn't a focus, it was a big scramble. Like it was,
yeah.
people were like, shit, how else can we get stuff into people's hands when they're stuck at home? So yeah, I think it's interesting. E-commerce has seen an incredible amount of growth in the last year and a half. And it seems like it's going to continue to go that way. So I think that's a smart way to relaunch for sure. Are you guys just thinking about D2C, or are you thinking about, Amazon and some other platforms, or how do you think about the entire e-commerce landscape?
Yeah, and so this was another thing that we ran into, is spreading ourselves too thin too fast on our initial launch. So we were doing specialty retail and direct to consumer and Amazon and getting into big grocery all at once with limited capital. And so to do all of these channels well simultaneously at launch is very, very difficult. So for us, really focusing in on one or two channels for our first 6-12 months,
Nice.
being direct consumer and being specialty retail. So think Equinox, Erewhon, Earth Bar, a lot of like customer discovery places. They're almost revenue generating marketing platforms is really how we look at them. And brand building accounts can help build our brand with us. And then we are scheduled to do select tests with larger retail partners. So basically an East Coast and a West Coast retail chain in the national organic space that we can really prove out velocity, build up those sort of loyal customers in these accounts, and then grow from there. If you're launching with 100 stores of this chain, 100 stores of that chain, and you're also online, you're also Amazon, like you're not gonna do anything well. So if we can do one or two channels really well in our first 12 months, that'll be a success for us.
That makes sense. And you can kind of hone in all your focus on those key channels that you're launching in. I think that's also smart. That's a great way to redo it.
Yeah, and each channel also requires a lot of attention, a lot of energy. So like if you're not giving your 100% to your online channel, it's not going to grow as quickly and as fast as you might want it. And if you're sort of half-assing your retail partners, you're not really building up a great case study and a great platform to expand. So if you can really nail one or two platforms, and then obviously we're not sort of zeroing out like Amazon and stuff like that. We definitely want to grow into other channels in the future, but our first 12 months we primarily direct to consumer.
Got it. Love it. That's great. Um, next, the question I had was around like I guess bootstrapping versus raising capital. You mentioned that you guys do have some investors, and obviously through a merger that has changed a little bit. But early on, back when you first started kicking this off, I always think there's like two routes people go. It's either like you try to do the bootstrapping way if you can, number one, and number two, if you can't, just like being extremely scrappy and probably growing a lot slower. And then some people go down the, it's raise capital. I feel like I've talked to quite a few founders on here, and there's definitely not a right or wrong way to do it. There's a million different ways you can go about that. Do you remember early on, like kind of how you thought through that whole component of starting a business and what you honestly ended up doing, I guess, in the end with Simple?
Yeah, so I wish I could say it was more well thought out in the beginning than it was. So I started this as a side project at Michigan when I was a second semester junior. So I was going to an internship with JP Morgan over the summer. I was like a finance econ major, really Didn't think about having my own business, at least in the near term. And it was something I started sort of in my kitchen on the side. Ended up sort of pitching it to business plan competitions and grants and awards. And so I ended up winning about $50,000 in grants and awards from the business school before I
Wow.
graduated. And
Oh,
so
that's huge.
the Ross Business School has a ton of programs and grants and awards and business plan competitions that you can apply for. So we sort of won almost all of them by the time I graduated. And so when it's time to decide what I was going to do full time, I was either go back to do finance full time in New York or work on Simple full time. It was actually called Protein Bits before Simple.
Okay. Okay. Love it.
And it ended up deciding to pursue Simple full time. But sort of a caveat. The Ross Business School did invest $100,000 after I graduated to incentivize me to do it full time. So the Ross Business School
Wow.
was actually our first investor.
Oh, so they actually they were like, no, this is a great idea. You should focus on this full time. Here's some money to kind of give you a
Yeah,
start.
yeah, because
That's pretty
I think
cool.
right out of school with no food or beverage background to dive into a category I think this difficult with no backing, I think is a tough route. And I think it is a category, especially at sort of my age, being young, that if you can go in full time and spend all of your energy learning everything, the ins and outs of the industry, and really spending your full time on it, I don't think you can get that from doing it part time. I think it could also just take longer.
Yeah.
Um, so basically, with that, we worked with a great branding agency. I did a lot of the product formulation stuff myself. Did a couple like soft launch, go to market type stuff, but like in like a dozen sort of stores here and there. Nothing crazy. And then I did end up raising a $500,000 angel round when I actually moved to New York with about 10,000 bags, and just started selling them door to door. And from that sort of minor success, I ended up raising a $500,000 on that round. And now we're actually raising a seed round right now for this new launch.
Oh, wow. Congratulations. So you've kind of been
Yeah,
in that investing game or raising capital game, I should say, for some time.
yeah. But our first year when I raised the first 100,000 from Michigan, it was super bootstrapping. Like brand agency costs a lot of developing products and test runs with the co-packers. It costs a lot. So like at the end of that, before we really got to market, it was pretty bootstrapped. I don't want to say 100% bootstrapped because we did have a little bit of backing there, but I think even if you are backed by investors, whether it's angels or VCs, you still have to have that sort of scrappiness and not being wasteful and all that type of stuff.
Oh
Either
yeah,
way.
for sure. Do you have any suggestions for anyone was kind of like would have been in your shoes today listening to this? Just like what either things you wish you would have done different, or maybe just the route you went if it worked well.
Yeah. So I, I do want to say if I were to do it again, I would do things differently, which is what we're doing now. But without knowing those things, like looking back, I don't think I would have done anything different because I didn't know any better.
Sure.
Um, but I think knowing that it's going to be a long game and it's not you're not getting into this and growing super fast. And you look at all these companies that on day one, I see a million ads for them and they're in Whole Foods and they're in this or that. They probably do have an experienced team behind them, or some years in the industry that they've put in. So I think just knowing that it can be a long-term game and just like talking to as many people as you can. I know probably talked to close to 1,000 people like in the industry that not everything's helpful, but I would say 90% plus is, and maybe you learn one thing about your subscription app platform that you should be using or what not to do when emailing Whole Foods. I think there's just a big learning curve, whether you're in the industry or not. And if you can get like an MVP type product that might not be final, but it's good enough where it tastes good enough and it looks good enough that people can be excited about it, taking that first step is super important because you can be working on perfecting it forever. We're obviously still not anywhere close to perfect, and we're just now getting to our sort of phase, almost like branding 3.0 at this point. But if we didn't get to branding 1.0 and 2.0, we wouldn't have got to 3.0.
Got it. Yeah, yeah, it makes sense. One thing that comes to mind too, as you've kind of gone through these different phases so far of Simple, one thing that you've gone through that I don't think anyone else I've had on here has is going through a merger. So, what was that? You've hit it on already a little bit, but what were some key takeaways there, learning lessons? I guess I have experience now professionally, kind of going through one at a large company. But curious what it was like for, really two brands who were, I don't want to say struggling, but going through a really tough year and a tough time and
Yeah.
realize like there were synergies by coming together. That's very different than most mergers even.
Yeah, so definitely not, not anywhere near the level of the Kellogg RX merger. But yeah, so we were both in unique positions where we had a lot of good things going for us. They had a lot of good things going for them, but we were each missing a couple pieces. Part of that was team, part of that was access to capital, and it was sort of an organic type of opportunity. Our first conversation had nothing to do with coming together whatsoever. It was like, what are you guys doing? This is what we're doing. Is there any way we can like sort of help each other or learn from you guys? You can learn from us.
Oh,
And
really?
sort
So
of
it was more of
at
like a knowledge share to get started.
absolutely. And sort of over the course of a couple months of talking, started talking more and more, and saw there was they ended up loving sort of our brand direction. I ended up loving their product, and we both had our own relationships with suppliers and investors and retailers, manufacturers that could be useful for each other. And instead of going at this our separate ways and getting through COVID, this was back in August, so COVID wasn't really going away anytime soon at that time. Sort of come together. It was definitely not the complexity of a Kellogg RX at that point, and obviously very different because we were both very new. It was almost like introducing a new brand to the market,
Hmm.
and taking what he learned, what we learned, and coming together. And now it's worked out super well. Basically, I'm leading as the CEO, the founder of the other company, which is formerly known as Fido. His name is Will, and he's now coming on as our COO. So sort of also different skill sets. From my side, more the sales and marketing and sort of the fundraising side. On Will's side, he's awesome on our supply chain and manufacturing ops, sort of down the line. So now I can really focus what I'm good at. He's really can really focus what he's good at. And I think a much stronger team going back to market.
That's awesome. It's interesting to see companies that are, it's funny. Lately, I've been seeing a lot more of this. I feel like through conversations of my own. It's cool when you find two people that help basically lead an organization, and they really are made up of two really like completely different either backgrounds or just what they're good at or want to focus on. When you have two founders who want to do the exact same thing, it can be a little tough, right? And especially because you probably both have ideas that you want to kind of lead with for every single
Yeah,
thing that comes up in the business versus kind of like going and doing your own things, making sure you're both executing and you come together for the better of the company. So that's really cool. That's awesome that you guys were able to find, a partner that also was led by someone who had different skills than yourself.
yeah, and I think obviously the startup, it's I'm still involved in the ops every day. He's still involved in like the sales and marketing every day. So there is a lot of overlap, as I'm sure there will be for a long time.
Sure,
But
sure.
it is nice to each have our own, to have a lead on each task, and obviously fill in when the other person needs it and support and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, it worked out well.
Well, that's exciting. That's exciting. It sounds like, from this episode so far, I mean, you've been through a lot of learning lessons, and I'm sure you're
Yeah,
really excited to like be coming out the other end of COVID, and not just coming out, but now coming out with a whole new brand strategy, a whole new, components of the leadership team, a new look and feel and
yeah.
product. I mean, it's got to be really exciting.
Yeah, totally new look, totally new branding, totally new product, but still the same thesis that we had in the beginning of bringing these functional ingredients and foods into sort of the mainstream consumer in a sort of a convenient and tasteful way. So I think keeping that as our North Star helped as we sort of made all of these different changes, but not going away from our original thesis of starting the brand in the first place.
Right. Got it. And so uh with that, I mean, you're launching with bars. Do you have plans to ever bring bites back, or you don't have to share anything, but if you have any other teasers for the listeners on like what could be coming down the line as other things that you're going to add function to? Because I think this is a space that's going to see massive growth in the next decade.
Yeah, so no plans of the bites yet, but again, so our first four functions that we're launching this summer: energy, focus, calm, and immunity. We're definitely have a couple more functions in the pipeline. Think of the moment you wake up to the moment you sleep, how many different sort of use occasions there are during that day, and our goal is to hit on all of them. So we have a couple products in the pipeline now. We'll probably likely introduce another product next year, another function. Thinking of sort of the latter half of the day. Um, and yeah, so that's about all I can share right now. But we do have 4 products almost ready to go that can't wait to share.
Love it. That's super exciting. This is a new question. I have like a group of questions I love to ask founders towards the end of the show. Now that you've gone through, the experience of building something, merging with someone else, and now leading this new organization, could you ever see yourself working for a big company? Like, could you ever see there be a day come where you would sell this company and go work for someone else?
I could see working for a larger organization. Yes. It depends on the hierarchy, I think. I think a lot of organizations these days are adopting or creating teams that sort of run more entrepreneurial, that sort of run themselves, but are a part of a larger organization. I think something like that's attractive. And I think that's something that'll continue growing. If you even look at something like Kellogg with their 1894, their venture arm, PepsiCo has something similar. So I think more and more, Goldman Sachs has something similar. So I think more and more companies will create these smaller, sort of almost independent organizations that can sort of run as their own businesses, but still have the backing and the finance and the resources of a larger company. I think that should continue to grow, and would be attractive if that day ever came.
There you go. No, I love it. I love it. I always think it's interesting, like once you you know, get a sense of being your own boss and an entrepreneur, like
Yeah,
if there's ever any like look over your shoulder of like, oh, I wonder what's still out there, working for a company, or if it's just like now that you know how
yeah.
to do it, if it's something you'd always want to do.
Well, hopefully we're doing this for a long time.
Yeah. Love it. No, love it. Love it. Um, the question that I love to ask every single founder, because I think leading a company, especially in the food space, there's just, and you hit on it between you and your COO, there's so many different things happening all the time. And especially trying to launch something, there's so many moving pieces. Knowing that, what do you use to, track towards goals, and really plan your days and just get shit done? Are you a pen and paper kind of guy? Do you have apps you use? Like, what is like your tool set to just get things done?
Yeah, so I tried the apps. I did try the Asanas of the world to try to narrow down every little thing and document it. It was almost counterintuitive. I think more so because we're a small team. I think once you grow into a larger start, maybe 20, 30 people, some of these apps might make more sense. I still stick to notes and Google Sheets, and Google Docs so we can share it amongst the team. Basically, every morning or every night before I go to sleep, we'll create a priority list of items that must be done tomorrow, could be done tomorrow, or if you have time, can do tomorrow.
Oh, love
And
it.
I'll do that in just like Apple Notes. It syncs to my phone and my computer, so wherever I am, I can have that. And then across our team, Google Sheets, so like using Google Drive and just having like a launch plan. So we'll have like Gantt charts or production charts for each sort of function. So for our operation, our production, we have our own sort of Google Sheet for that tracks every single item that's happening, every ingredient of how it's being, when it's being shipped, when it's being delivered, what date our packaging is going to arrive. So it gets sort of pretty granular on that level. And then sort of a hierarchy sort of launch plan of like, and obviously we're going to launch, so it's launch plan right now. But even as we grow, specific milestones that we want to reach, and what are the key things that we need to hit, and then within that, we'll create sort of separate sheets to go more granular. But it's nice to have like a sort of 2 separate ones. This one to track like our big milestones, and this is what we need to hit, this is what we need to do on a bigger level, and then to stay organized. You really need to write every single thing down, because if it's not written down for me, it's probably not getting done.
Yeah.
And I use a Superhuman email app, which is incredibly helpful too.
What? Yeah. What is superhuman? When you emailed me, I saw that, and I was going to ask you about it today.
Yeah, so it's just a way to keep track of outstanding emails. So if it's you get 100 emails a day, in like every time you finish an email, you can mark it as done, and it'll go into your done folder, so you don't see it on your top of your inbox. So you don't have to scroll through to see what you have to respond to. You can either mark it done or mark it as remind me. So if it's something that I get emailed today, but I don't need to respond till Thursday, you just do remind me on Thursday. It'll resend it to you on Thursday, clear out of your inbox for now. So by the end of the day, if you can have a zero emails in your inbox, that's the goal. So
Yeah. Got it.
it keeps track of things that you need to respond to, versus things that you can sort of respond to and you're done with.
Oh, that's really cool. Got it. Love it. Love those little hacks that are always good for people who are just trying to optimize.
Yeah, no, it's helpful.
Um, this one is I always say book, but it can be book, podcast, just source of knowledge for everyone listening. What is one source of knowledge you would suggest to the audience?
Good question. So I listen to Brand Builder a lot. I think I've probably listened to every episode at this point. I think a big thing of that as we're sort of growing our brand, it is always staying true, like, sort of how I mentioned earlier, true to your North Star, true to your true brand pillars, and then building off that. And I think all the brands on there have done an incredible job. As you grow, so many things change, but if you can keep your value props the same, your brand pillars the same, your sort of vision and mission, sort of always coming back to that. I think that was super helpful. So like as we're going through all of our brand guides and our building all that out for the new Simple, that's definitely something I listen to almost daily,
Love it.
to make sure we didn't stray too far.
That's great. That's awesome. I'm sure people will love that. I think that's a great one just because there's just lots of different things you can learn from that for sure.
Yeah.
Last one and the most important one. How can listeners follow along and and not really get a hold of, but follow along in your journey? And how can they follow and get a hold of Simple? And then maybe just one last reminder to when the brand is planning on launching.
Yeah, so you can find us livesimple.com, simple spelled SMPL .com. And so we have our landing page right now. Leave your email. You'll get notified when we launch. You can also text us 5106 text simple. So that's
Nice.
another way you can get a hold of us. We answer within minutes. So we are building out our SMS text to order and communication platform as we speak. And so if you subscribe either text or email or follow us on Instagram, Live Simple as well. That's where you'll get updates. And you follow me on LinkedIn. My name's Ellis Fried, and we'll post everything on one of those couple of channels. And we are launching end of summer.
Love it. The SMS thing I think is huge. I always tip the hat to people who are tackling that up front. Personally, I'm super bullish on just that becoming. I feel like as email gets more and more overwhelming, your text
Yeah,
thread can if you sign up for too many of those. But if you do a good job of like not overdoing it, I love the brands like every now and then I get a reminder through text. It's so easy to just open a text and either you like hit the link, go to what we're kind of the hole they're sending you down, or not. It just doesn't feel as overwhelming as your inbox does.
yeah. So keeping it not sort of spammy, especially with our subscription, we'll remind consumers 2 to 3 days before the subscription is coming. They can edit, add products, cancel their subscription, skip their subscription, just with one text. So
That's
as we build
awesome.
out a subscription model, we think that texting is super important because I've had a lot of subscriptions. They're sort of a nightmare of figuring out. Well, I want to switch product. I want the energy now. I want the immunity, or I actually have too much, so I want to skip and having to go into the platform and do it. You just text us and we'll respond and fix it for you.
That's
Um,
so cool. That's great.
yeah, so we're building that out too as we speak.
That's fantastic. Well, good for you guys. It sounds like, this rebrand is giving you an opportunity to like come out even stronger. And with a
Yeah,
lot of like that's something that people who haven't done it, I don't think people realize how much work goes into launching something like that. But I think it's just going to pay dividends long term to have that ease of use and coming through the phone that way. I think is going to be impactful for you guys.
yeah. Well, I'm excited to get you some bars when we launch.
There we
We'll keep
go.
you posted.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate it. Well, Ellis, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. This was a blast, and I'm pumped for you. And we'll keep an eye out when you guys do launch. Maybe after you kind of get through the haze of the
Yep,
craziness, we can have you back on and talk more about the brand and how things are going.
perfect. I'm looking forward to it. Appreciate it,
Awesome.
Shane.
Thanks, man. Cool.
All
Well,
right,
have a
talk
good
soon.